Power level in Commander is something that's talked about often and is a really tricky thing to understand. So the purpose of this video today is to talk about power level in a manner that allows new players to understand power level dynamics in Commander, so that when you sit down and play games of Commander, you have an idea of what to expect when you're playing your games. So what we have here today is actually my Werewolf Tribal Commander deck. I'm going to be double sleeving this while I'm talking, just so I can kind of do two things at one time. So when we talk about power level in Commander, like, why is that something that's important when we're talking about playing Commander as a new player? You know, when you're playing Commander, you're going to play a lot of games. That's just the immediate thing to understand. Commander is such a fun game, and there's so many cool people you get to meet. There's so many fun games you're going to have and fun moments you're going to experience while playing Commander, and we want to maximize those positive experiences. And when we're playing Commander, it's really easy to sit down and play a game at a table, right? But it's not so easy to have a really good understanding of the types of decks you're going to be playing against, because some Commander decks you play against are extremely average, and then some Commander decks you play against are going to win a game in 1 to 2 to 3 turns if you don't do anything about it. And sometimes some of those decks that win in 1 to 2 to 3 turns, and oftentimes not even just some of those decks, some decks that are just looked at as slightly powerful, can be a not so fun experience playing against when you're playing as a deck that is not as powerful, because you're just kind of sitting there watching people play for like 20 minutes and then you go leave. And watching people play games of Commander and not actually being a part of a game can be a slightly frustrating experience. So what we're looking to do today is to minimize that by educating new players on what power level is. So in order for us to understand power level, right, we have to be able to know what is the weakest, we have to know what is the strongest, and we have to know what is considered average. And I think where we're going to start with this conversation is understanding the average. What is a power level that everybody has access to in Commander? What is something that somebody who's never played Commander in their life before, and then somebody who's been playing for 8 years, what is a power level that they all have access to? And that power level we're going to call a precon. If I go out and I buy a pre-constructed Commander deck, I'm going to be playing at a specific power level. And even when you're playing games of Commander right now, when you go out to a store, people say like, oh, like, what's your power level? Somebody will say something like, oh, it's an upgraded precon, or it's a little bit better than a precon. That's kind of something that's generally understood, right? And even amongst precons, you have some precons that are pretty weak, and then you have some precons that are pretty strong, right? So the point being is that precon is an already understood power level that for $30 or $40 you can go to a store and have access to. On a scale of 1 to 10, which is the scale that we're going to use today, and the scale that I recommend you use when you go play games of Commander, we're going to call precons the numbers 4 and 5 out of 10. The weak precons, or the average precons, we're going to call a 4. The stronger precons, we're going to call a 5. Now, why specifically are we calling this one a 4 and this one a 5? What do precons, how do you build a Commander deck that's at the power level of a precon? What does a precon actually mean? Now, to me, right, and this is just my opinion is just as valuable and just as worthless as everybody else's opinion. To me, a precon is basically saying that I have a Commander deck and a commander that wants to achieve something. There are cards inside here. I don't know what I was doing there. There are cards in here that are powerful and focused, and there are also cards inside of this deck that don't really belong in this commander deck. Like when you buy a precon, you'll buy something and the commander will be about +1/+1 counters, and just because it's in the color red, they'll throw in Atali Primal Storm in the commander deck that has nothing to do with +1/+1 counters. So you often find cards that just don't belong in the deck. They don't synergize well with the commander. So when we're talking about precon power level, we're talking about a themed commander deck, right? There's a theme, it works a certain way, but there are also cards inside there that don't really belong, that Wizards just wants you to own, to have as a part of your collection, to potentially build as a commander in the future. There are cards like that that exist in precons. Now, does that necessarily win, or does that increase your chance of winning? Probably not. It probably hurts your chances of winning having cards like that in your commander deck, but that's just something that we all have to live with when we're talking about precons. So now we've established the numbers 4 and 5 inside this power level, right? Now, we have to, I think, talk about what's the highest power level. At number 10, what is a 10 in Commander? And a 10 to me in Commander is CEDH. There is a form of, it has, dude, this power level is so high that it literally has its own term, and we call it CEDH. This is competitive Commander. This power level, we're talking about decks that are so strong that if you don't do anything to stop these decks, they will win the game in 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 turns. If I don't counter a spell here, if I don't destroy a creature over there, if I don't do something to stop anything that you're doing, they're gonna win the entire game in 3, 4, or 5 turns. Chances are. So that is a 10. When we're talking about that winning the entire thing, that's what a 10 is. And I think it's for people, if you're a person that owns a commander deck that can play like that, it's really easier for you to understand that you have a commander deck that is CEDH. You have to specifically go out and spend a lot of money to make a deck that powerful to win that way. We're gonna call that a CEDH commander deck, right? A deck that can win the entire game in 3 or 4 turns. That is what a 10 is, okay? Now that we've established what a 4 and a 5 is, which is a precon, and that we've established what a 10 is, which is CEDH in entire format, what is a 1, a 2, and a 3, right? When we talk about 1s, 2s, and 3s as a power level in Commander, we have to look at it like a 1 is basically saying that this deck has a commander and there are cards in it. There is no reason why these cards are inside the deck other than that they are just cards to play. You just threw a bunch of random things together and that's a deck. And a lot of these times people call these decks theme decks. Like, what if somebody's playing, oh, I want to play a horse focused or a horse themed commander deck, which means that you're probably going to have a commander deck that just has a bunch of horses in it, which doesn't necessarily mean it's a lot of synergy. It's just there to be funny. And dude, you guys would be surprised at how many of those decks, not horse tribal commander decks, how much those exist, but more just like themed for fun, funny commander decks. I play against those decks all the time. So oftentimes when you watch these decks, they're bad, and the people sit down and tell you that they're bad, that they really, if they play 10 games, they're lucky if they win 1 game with that deck, you know, but they don't care. They just want to sit down and laugh and have fun. That's the spirit of Commander. So when we're talking about that, those are the decks that are between a 1, a 2, and a 3. I'm playing Jandor's Saddlebags. I have nothing to untap inside this commander deck, but there's a picture of a horse inside of it, so I'm playing this card. Those decks exist. So that's what a 1, a 2, and a 3 is, okay? And it's really easy for a person to tell when you have a commander deck. that is that, okay? Now, moving beyond a 1, 2, and a 3, we know what a 4 and a 5 is, which is what a precon is that everyone has access to. We know what a 10 is, and what we're left with are the numbers 6, 7, 8, and 9. And these numbers are incredibly important because between the numbers of 6, 7, 8, and 9 is where the majority of Commander, when you sit down and play Commander, at some point during your life, you're going to be playing between these power levels. This is the majority of your gameplay experience, right? So how do we define this area between 6, 7, 8, and 9? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start from 5, which is what we're going to call a powerful precon. How does one make a powerful precon a little bit better? How do we go from a 5 to a 6? Now, we go from a 5 to a 6 by eliminating the cards that have no reason being inside the commander deck, which may be 2 or 3 cards, which may be 5 cards. By removing those cards, the Etali in a +1/+1 counter commander deck, when we remove those cards and not even add cards that are specifically really powerful, I'm not talking about adding Bolas' Citadel, Aetherflux Reservoir, Sensei's Divining Top, and having this infinite combo that can just knock everyone out of the game. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we're just adding cards that care about +1/+1 counters. And by doing that and adding those cards inside that deck, suddenly your deck becomes more focused. So what we have here at number 6 is an upgraded, focused commander deck. That's what we're looking at when we're looking at the power level of 6. I've taken this precon, or a deck that is comparable to a precon, and now the entire deck is focused on this one strategy. It doesn't have the most powerful cards inside that theme. It's just a deck that is focused, that can play well against other commander decks, and can, on average, would beat precon decks pretty consistently. That's what we have at that power level. Now, when we're talking about the power level of 6, let's go 1 point down from 10, which is going to leave us at 9. What is a power level of 9? What does 9 mean in Commander? When we say a power level of 9, that means you do not have a CEDH deck. That means that if you were to go out and to buy cards that are the best in the format and put it inside that deck, you would have a CEDH deck. You are on the cusp of having a CEDH level commander deck. Now, what warrants a power level of 9? Why is it not a 10? And why is it better than an 8? What does that even mean, right? The power level of 9 is essentially saying I'm playing a powerful commander deck that's not going to win the game, that's not going to win the entire game or in 3 or 4 turns. To me, a power level 9 commander deck is a deck that says I'm going to control this game. And if you guys can't do anything about me controlling this game, I'm going to win this entire game. Not saying that I'm going to win in 2 or 3 or 4 turns. No, we're going to sit down and play a game. But if you guys don't do anything, I'm going to control. And I think control is incredibly important. You can control combat. You can control the game through counter spells. You can control the game through making things cost more. There are a million ways for an individual to control a game of Commander. And it's important to be aware of that, because when we're talking about this power level being at a 9, power level 9 are decks that have some method of controlling the game. Controlling the game meaning that they are going to interact with the other players on the board a lot. And if you don't do anything about them interacting or stopping other players from playing the game, they're generally going to win the game. That's what a power level 9 is to me, right? So now that we know what a 9 is, which is not a CDH deck, but is a very powerful controlling in some aspect commander deck, what we're left with is 7 and 8, right? Now, what is a power level of 7? You know, earlier we talked about a power level of 6 being a focused precon, slightly upgraded precon, right? That's what a power level of 6 is. Now, when we're talking about a power level of 7, what we're talking about is a deck that is an upgraded precon. It's still that precon, that power level, right? It's focused. But when we talk about a power level of 7, we have some cards inside this commander deck are the best cards in the entire format within this strategy. If we go to edhrec.com, or if we go to a specific person talking about a specific card, we know that in every one of these decks, if I'm building a +1/+1 counter commander deck and I want it to be strong, I'm probably going to want a doubling season inside this commander deck. I'm probably going to want other cards that are extremely powerful that happen to the +1/+1 counters, right? The Ozolith. Cards that are just incredibly powerful for +1/+1 counters. The difference between a 6 and a 7 is this commander deck at a 7 has those powerful cards. It doesn't mean it has some of the best cards that are just generically powerful in the format. No. Inside this strategy, within +1/+1 counters, I have some of the best cards inside the game inside this deck. And if I play them, it's going to do incredibly powerful things. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to stop everyone from playing the game. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to win right on the spot. It's just saying that I have those cards inside this deck. I'm playing +1/+1 counters, and I have a doubling season. The difference between not having a doubling season and a doubling and having one is pretty distinct. There's a reason why doubling season is always a $40, $50, $60 card. It's a $40, $50, $60 play, right? It's an incredibly powerful card. So the idea is that the difference between a 6 and a 7 is that you spent the $60 to upgrade the commander deck in that way, and now you have access to that play. Now, what's the difference between a 7 and an 8? When we go to having an 8, what is an 8 power level commander deck? An 8 power level commander deck is a deck that basically says, I have those doubling seasons, right? I have upgraded this precon. This is a powerful commander deck. And although now I've added cards inside this deck that are just generically strong in the format, right? I don't need to have a Force of Will in my commander deck, but I pulled one inside of this pack and I'm playing in those colors, so I'm just gonna throw that card inside here. I don't need to have Smothering Tithe inside this commander deck, but I'm just gonna play this Smothering Tithe. I'm just gonna play this Rhystic Study because I have it, and I'm just gonna throw it in this commander deck. Once we talk about you having 3, 4, or 5 just generically powerful cards inside a deck that has some of the best cards in the format inside your theme, like Doubling Season, now we're talking about a commander deck that is just has the ability to really do a lot of powerful things because you have cards that are just generically powerful inside the entire format. So a power level of 8 is having cards that are just generically, universally understood as the most powerful cards in the format inside a deck that has the best cards inside that theme in that deck. But the difference between a power level 8 and a power level 9 is that if I take that same deck with generically powerful cards, with generically the best cards in a theme inside a deck, and then I turn that deck into a control deck, like a really heavily focused control deck, now you have a commander deck that just went from an 8 to a 9 because now you're stopping other people from playing the game. A power level at 8 is like, no, I got these strong cards in this deck, but I'm not really interacting with my opponents that much. I'm not slowing them down in some way. I'm not controlling the game in some aspect. However, I do have the ability to have explosive and powerful plays that are going to help me win games. But it doesn't necessarily mean I'm stopping you from doing your explosive or powerful plays, right? Now, in the end, what are we left with? We're left with numbers 1 through 10, and I'm gonna go from 1 through 10 right now. 1 through 3 are commander decks that are for fun commander decks. These are your themed commander decks. These are your horse. Oh, there's a horse in the picture, or like there are other things inside here. This is just, it's just thrown together for fun. It's just to laugh. A power level of a 4 or a 5 is a commander deck that has some focus, however, at the same time is also built in a way to have cards that have nothing to do with your focus. It just has cards inside there that are not bad cards by any stretch of the imagination, but just don't really go along with the theme of the commander deck. Now, a power level 6 is a commander deck that was once a precon that removed all of those just the cards that don't necessarily help with the theme. We removed those cards and just added okay cards that are just more on theme. That's going to make the deck play more consistently. At a power level 7, we've now added the best cards inside that theme to that commander deck. Okay. At power level 8, we've added the best cards inside the entire format to that commander deck that has cards that are the best cards in that theme. At a power level 9, we've added some control aspect to that deck that has generically powerful cards and that has the generically best cards in that theme in that deck. Now I'm controlling the game and I get to do all this stuff with all these cards. At a power level 10, you're now reducing the mana value of a lot of the cards inside your deck, and you technically have some combo within that control shell with the best cards in that theme, with the best cards in that format, and you've put everything together in a way that says, if you don't stop me in 2 to 3 to 4 turns in some way, I'm going to just win the game. I'm going to tutor for this card, I'm going to tutor for this, I'm going to put this on the battlefield, I'm going to go infinite, and I'm going to win. That's just the way this works. And that is what a power level 10 is. So to me, guys, that is how a new player, when you're sitting down talking about commander and talking about power level, to me, in my humble opinion, right, that is what I think should be universally understood when we're all sitting down playing games of commander, so that you know exactly what you're playing against when you play games of commander. So when people say, oh, I'm playing a power level of 1, oh, I'm playing a power level of 2, oh, I'm playing a power level of 5, people know exactly what you're looking for, so that you can just have more enjoyable games. Because, you know, everybody wants to spend their time wisely and everybody wants to have fun games of commander. And I think that by understanding power level this way, of which you can disagree, and let me know what you think in the comment section below of how you would judge this, but I think that by doing that, you put yourself in a place where you can experience more positive games. Okay, if you like this video, you can like this video. Okay, always remember, eat healthy. Okay, work out every single day. Most importantly, you guys got to remember to believe in yourself. All right, peace out, people.